at 06:05 local time in the Gulf of Oman. The USS Bulkeley holds a slow 8-knot circle, 96 missile cells sealed beneath her forward deck. The crew has been waiting on one order for 6 hours. It just arrived. Drop a railway bridge in northeastern Iran, one of the last lifelines connecting Tehran to the outside world. But the moment the first hatch opens, the ship trades her ambush for a lit flare, and the Iranian coast is watching. Hatch 27 bangs open on the forward deck. The first Tomahawk screams straight up out of its cell on a column of solid rocket exhaust. 8 seconds later, a second hatch snaps back and another missile rips past the mast. The third and fourth tear out behind them. On the bridge, the officer of the deck calls the last round clear. Down in the Combat Information Center, the watch team starts the only clock that matters now, 86 minutes to impact. Then the Bulkeley runs. 4 booster plumes have just drawn a flaming arrow to her position, visible for 40 miles on a clear morning, and Iran's coastal anti-ship batteries need nothing but a datum and a bearing to answer. Flank speed, 30-plus knots, wake boiling white. The ship is gone from the datum before anyone ashore can turn a launch flash into a firing solution. The strike is on its own now. If you look here at the forward deck, you'll see what launched them. The Mark 41 vertical launch system, a bank of 96 armored cells built flush into the deck, each one holding a single missile sealed in its own canister. When the fire order comes, the cell hatch snaps open and the booster lights. The round rides its own exhaust straight out of the deck. No rail, no crane, no need to point the ship. Think of it as a magazine where every bullet is also its own barrel. 12 seconds off the deck, the first Tomahawk's booster burns out and drops away. A wing swings out of a slot in the fuselage. 4 tail fins flick open. Something in its back spins up to a whine. The missile pitches over, levels off 50 feet above the water, and drives north. 3 more do the same behind it. The solid rocket had one job: throw the round clear of the ship and point it at its heading. Now the whine you heard spinning up earns its keep. A Williams F-14A turbofan buried in the missile's back takes over. The 2,900-pound Block V Tomahawk stops being a rocket and becomes a small aircraft. Cruise speed, 550 miles an hour. Range, better than 1,000 miles. It goes up like a bottle rocket and settles down like an airliner. And 50 feet over the water is invisible to almost every radar on the Iranian coast. Almost every radar. The one above Bandar Abbas doesn't work the way you're thinking. On a ridge above the city, a scope that has spent 6 quiet hours reading nothing begins to change. 4 smudges harden into contacts, low, slow for jets, far too fast for boats, driving north in a loose line. The operator never painted them with a single watt of energy, and he doesn't need to. He calls the tracks up the line. A position box starts moving north through Iran's air defense net, racing the missiles it describes. The antenna field on that ridge has no rotating dish and no transmitter mast, just vertical whips and one flat UHF panel. Iran calls it Alim, a passive radar, and passive means exactly what it sounds like. Alim never transmits a thing. It listens to the FM radio and TV broadcast signals that already fill Iranian airspace 24 hours a day. Then it compares 2 copies of the same signal, one straight from the broadcast tower, one that bounced off something moving overhead. The difference between those 2 copies tells the computer where that something is, updated about once a second. Tehran claims it reads slow, low-moving targets out past 150 miles. That's Tehran's number, not the Pentagon's, and it only needs a sliver of that this morning. Think of it as reading a boat's wake instead of looking for the boat. The morning drive time DJ in Bandar Abbas has no idea he's part of an air defense network. The 4 Tomahawks driving toward the coast can't be warned. No crew aboard, no threat receiver. But Alim can't aim a missile. All it hands over is a 2-mile box and a heading. The Khordad's own radar has to construct the shot. To do that, it has to break over and transmit. At 06:17, a flat panel on a transporter inland snaps from cold to active in under a second. The beam lands on the bearing Alim handed it. 4 load tracks resolve. A big 2-stage missile punches out of its canister beside the array and climbs. The flat array on the vehicle that just fired is the Najm 802, the eyes of the Khordad 15. The whole battery rides on wheels. The array steers its beam electronically instead of swinging a dish. That's how it landed on Alim's bearing without moving a bolt. Tehran credits it with finding a fighter or cruise missile out to about 93 miles, even a stealth shape at 53. As with everything Iran publishes about its own hardware, treat the exact number as advertising. The missile it fired is the Sayyad-3. It isn't climbing towards some ceiling. It flies a constantly recalculated intercept, the computer updating the collision point dozens of times a second, like the way a shortstop throws to the bag instead of at the runner. The battery can steer 6 of these at once. Today, it needs 4. The catch is that today's collision point sits just above the wave tops, the hardest geometry a surface-to-air missile ever faces. The sea splashes radar energy back off everything, skimming just above it. And a Mach 4 warhead chasing a 50-foot target can lose it in the glitter. 3 Tomahawks are still over water, the 4th just crossed the beach, and a coastal ridge stands in front of it. If the Sayyad-3 solution converges while the missile is on top of that ridge, 50 feet of cleverness stops mattering. Look here at the small radar altimeter under the Tomahawk's nose as it hits the shore. That's the sensor that has flown it flat and level all the way in, bouncing a beam off the sea, riding a fixed height above the return. The instant the beach passes underneath, that reference disappears and the missile switches to its stored terrain map, climbing over ridges, settling into valleys, holding about 150 feet above the ground. That handoff is the whole flight's most exposed moment. For a few seconds, the missile has to pop above the ridge crest before it can drop down the far side. It's like a soldier crawling under a fence line, safe on both sides, but in plain sight for the 2 seconds he's on top of it. That pop puts the 4th missile inside the Najm 802's clean track window for 11 seconds. 11 is plenty. The Sayyad-3 arrives over the crest at Mach 3+. Its warhead tears the Tomahawk into a spray of burning debris that rains down the far slope. On the battery, the track winks out. The crew sends the intercept up the chain. First score to the coast. 1 intercepted, 3 flying. The Khordad crew swings its beam after the survivors and finds valley mouths. The terrain has already swallowed them. But Iran doesn't only shoot from the ground. At 0621, an F-14 Tomcat alert crew at Bandar Abbas gets a scramble order, and the Alim track file gets a second customer. At Bandar Abbas Tactical Air Base, the Tomcat breaks ground 5 minutes after the order and turns north. In the pilot's headset, the ground controller reads it flat. 3 contacts, bearing 350 on the deck. The pilot tips the antenna downward, sweeping toward the mountains. The radar behind that big radome is older than the pilot flying it. It's the AN/AWG-9, a 1970s American pulse Doppler set Iran received with its Tomcats before the revolution. Tehran keeps it alive by machining its own spares. What made it famous is exactly what it's doing right now, looking down. Most radars of its era went blind against the ground. The AWG-9 picks a mover out of the clutter by the tiny frequency shift its motion stamps on the echo. It holds fighter-sized targets past 100 miles. Something as small as a Tomahawk shrinks that to a fraction. Iran's original Phoenix stock is long spent, so the missiles under this jet are the Fakor 90s. Iran's home-built rebuild of the Phoenix. So yes, a 1970s American radar is now hunting a 1980s American missile over Iran. It's the most awkward family reunion in military aviation history. The pilot pushes the throttles up and the tail chase is on. Then the lead Tomahawk banks with the terrain, ducks into a canyon, and the track dissolves into the mountainside. He regains it 2 valleys later, farther away than when he lost it. A stern chase is the worst math in aviation. The Tomcat cruises at about 70 miles an hour faster than the Tomahawk. At that closure, every mile it gains back costs about 50 seconds, and the Tomahawk can vanish into a valley in 15. So why not just firewall the throttles? Because the afterburner drinks fuel 4 times as fast, and Bandar Abbas is already a long way behind him. He hits the afterburner anyway. The jet slams him back into the seat. He needs roughly 15 seconds of continuous lock to launch. The terrain keeps handing him 9. Deep in the valleys ahead, a second problem has already started. One the Tomcat's radar can't show him. The survivor's satellite fix is sliding, a few yards east, then a few more. 2 clocks are running now, and the pilot only knows about his. 60 miles of Iranian mountains later, his fuel gauge makes the decision his controller was about to make for him. The Tomcat turns for home, with empty tanks and full weapons racks. At 0650, 41 minutes out, the 3 survivors cross into central Iran. The slide in their fix has now grown from yards to hundreds of yards. The cause sits under a stand of trees off a provincial highway, a trailer, a mast, one dish pointed at the sky, a GPS spoofer. A real GPS signal is astonishingly faint by the time it falls from orbit, weaker than a millionth of a billionth of a watt. The ground transmitter doesn't have to fight the satellite. It broadcasts a slightly louder counterfeit of the same signal on the same frequency. And a GPS receiver is polite. It believes whoever talks loudest. Iran builds its own for this job. This one is the Cobra V8. Tehran claims it reaches out better than 150 miles. Nobody outside Iran has confirmed that number. 2 of the 3 Tomahawks now believe they're farther east than they really are, a few hundred yards off and growing. The third has a ridgeline between it and that dish and never hears the lie. And that much error at the aim point puts a warhead in a farmer's field instead of a bridge span. Then the 2 drifted missiles cross a ridge in Semnan province, and their fix snaps back true in a single beat. A quarter of a mile error gone, and no satellite had anything to do with it. The instrument that did it is one you've already seen, the small radar altimeter under the nose. As the missile flies, the altimeter reads the ground beneath it, rising, falling, rising again. The flight computer compares that rise and fall against a map built from satellite photos before the mission. Where the shapes match, the missile knows exactly where it is, with no satellites and nothing to jam or counterfeit. Match points sit every few dozen miles along the route. Each one wipes the built-up error back to 0. That trick has a name, TERCOM, Terrain Contour Matching. It's why Tomahawks were hitting small targets 1,000 miles away back in the 1980s, and why they still hit them when the GPS gets stolen. At 0710, 21 minutes to the bridge, the Alim track file catches up with the missiles it describes. In a command truck on the eastern ridge of the Alborz, a Sevom Khordad battalion commander has been staring at the position box on his map for over an hour. Now his own Bashir search radar, the battery's long-range eyes, sweeps through it. All 3 painted once, around 60 miles. Each vehicle carries its own X-band engagement radar. Up to 3 TER-2B missiles ride ready above it. About 65 miles of reach against aircraft. The TER-2B rides the radar's beam in at about Mach 3 and steers toward the energy splashing back off the target. But it was built for aircraft at altitude. These Tomahawks are crossing the battery's front rather than flying at it, so their speed toward the radar is close to 0. The filter that erases hills, trees, and highway traffic reads them as ground and throws them away. At 150 feet, they're also hugging the very floor of its engagement envelope. It's an airport radar built to watch landing aircraft. It can't see the truck or the perimeter road. The commander holds his launcher on the bearing anyway and watches 3 healthy tracks stay buried in the notch. In the command truck, a captain is running the numbers by hand. The manual says one thing, the sky says another. 90 miles east, his answer has already been overtaken. The same track file that has been racing the missiles across Iran since 0617 won its race 20 minutes ago. It landed at a Tor M1 position outside Akala with time to spare, and the Tor is the only system Iran fielded today that was built for exactly this target. On a hard stand 2.5 miles east of the Atekekan Bridge, the Tor M1 crew has been closed up and hot for 20 minutes. The warning from IRGC Air Defense in Tehran was short. 3 cruise missiles inbound, axis northwest, expect low. At 0729, their search radar catches all 3, 14 miles out, under 300 feet, 90 seconds from the bridge. The commander picks the middle track and calls the launch. The missile leaps vertically out of one of the 8 tubes on the vehicle's roof, the launch charge thumping through the hull. It tips over hard in midair, and then it tears off northeast. Those 8 tubes hold Russia's interceptor for exactly this problem, swatting small, low, fast things out of the sky, over the one spot it's parked to protect. That's the whole job. Here is what separates this system from everything else Iran fired today. Every other radar treated these missiles as a sideline. The Tor was built for nothing else. Search radar on top, engagement radar, and 8 ready rounds in one track package. And the 9M331 carries no seeker of its own. The ground radar tracks both the target and the interceptor and radios course corrections all the way in. That makes the shot hard to jam and quick off the mark. The missile runs at about 1,900 miles an hour. It reaches out to 7.5 miles. Minimum engagement height, 33 feet. That matters. The targets are coming in at 150. The warhead is 32 pounds of fragmentation. It's a remote-controlled shotgun shell. The vehicle does the thinking the whole way, and the shell never has to. 10 seconds of flight. What the crew solves in those 10 seconds decides how many missiles reach the bridge. The 9M331's warhead catches the middle Tomahawk over open ground, a hard white flash. 550 miles an hour of cruise missile comes apart mid-stride, engine and wing cartwheeling into the scrub. Second score to the defense. But the outer two streak past on their bearings. A fan of fragments from the blast rakes the trailer's tail as it goes. It holds together. The Buffett walks it 200 yards off its planned line. By the time the Tor's engagement mount could swing onto either survivor, they're inside its minimum range. Gone. The engagement radar on the front of the Tor's turret is a single mount. It points one direction at a time, and it has to steer its own missile onto the target. So the crew isn't solving where the target is, it's solving where the target will be when the interceptor arrives. 3 targets, 3 crossing bearings. The mount builds one solution at a time. The crew picked the middle track because it offered the cleanest crossing angle. Right call. The outer two were never in reach. Slewing onto a new bearing and recomputing the lead cost seconds the targets no longer have to give. A goalkeeper with 1 glove. He saves the shot he leans toward, and 2 more balls are already behind him. That was Iran's last layer, and it just did exactly what the U.S. Navy expected it to do. The planners who built this strike priced Iran's defenses at 2 rounds before Bulkeley ever loaded them, and fired 4 so that 2 would still be flying right here, just over a minute from the bridge. And the last minute of a Tomahawk's flight is the smartest part of it. On the western edge of Akala, both survivors open a small optical window under the belly. The lead missile makes one crisp correction, a nudge onto a new line, as if it just recognized something below. It did, the river bend and the road T-junction. Now look at that small glass window under the Tomahawk's belly, just forward of the wing. That's DISMAC, Digital Scene Matching Area Correlation. In the last few miles, the missile stops trusting its map. It starts looking. A downward camera behind that window photographs the ground. The computer matches what it sees against a reference photo the mission planners loaded before launch. The river bend, the road junction, the bridge approach. Each clean match tightens its position within a few feet, several times a second, all the way down. A missile that can't find a match flies its last best guess from speed and heading alone. Close, and close doesn't drop bridges. It's the difference between following directions to a house and recognizing the house. The lead missile recognizes the house at 4 miles out and settles onto the center span with no room to spare. The trailer, still carrying the Tor's 200-yard shove, sees the right ground from the wrong angle. It hunts for pictures that refuse to line up. Its first match comes barely a mile out, enough time to fix its left-right error, not enough altitude left to stretch the dive forward onto the span. Each Tomahawk carries a 1,000-pound WDU-36 blast fragmentation warhead. The fuse in the lead missile's tail is set to wait through the concrete, not on it. At 07:31, 86 minutes after the first hatch opened, the lead Tomahawk punches through the center span of the Octakekan Bridge, nose first through a foot of reinforced concrete, a held fraction of a second. Then the blast lets go. The trailer pitches onto the eastern embankment 300 yards short. It opens a crater in the approach road and flattens a signal shack. Here's what that held fraction of a second bought. That warhead going off on top of the deck would have created the surface and scarred the truss, a 2-week repair. The same charge detonating under the deck lifts it off its supports and shears the truss at the same instant. Its center span folds into the Gorgon River. The 2 spans that leaned on it slump sideways off their bearings. A rail bridge like this is a long board laid across 3 brackets. Snap the middle bracket and the board doesn't just sag in the gap. It levers both ends off their supports. Nothing on rails crosses this river for months. 30 miles north at the Inca Barun dry port, a container train from Kazakhstan arrives on schedule with nowhere to go. If you enjoyed this video, watch how the Iranians tried to take on a U.S. aircraft carrier. Bye for now.